So who would be favored? This is kind of an interesting question. Who would be favored between Ohio State, who is really surging of late, and Georgia? Um, we've got an answer to that, and there's something called predictive spreads. It's something that a member over on Dog Post does quite a bit in his after hours activities, wagering on games, and he's been pretty dead on the entire season. And right now, it looks like Georgia would be somewhere around a touchdown favorite against Ohio State on a neutral field. I don't know. That sounds about right to me. It might be a touch low, but Ohio State's gotten a lot of momentum lately. The loss to Oregon is well behind them at this point, and not only that, but Oregon has shown that they're a pretty good team as well. So, you look at Ohio State 45-31 over Minnesota, the loss to Oregon by 7, 35-28 at home, and then a fair amount of games against teams that haven't been ranked here lately. Tulsa, Akron, Rutgers, Maryland, Indiana, Penn State, they beat them by 9, um, and then kind of goofed around with Nebraska before putting them away. But there's been momentum for the Buckeyes, and there's no certainty that these two teams will play. I mean, I think there's certainty that Georgia will be in the college football playoff, and I think there's suspicion that Ohio State will be there. But this is a game that Ohio State's going to have to get through Michigan State this weekend. Ohio State's going to have to get past Michigan a week after that. That's a tough back-to-back, and then you would have the Big Ten championship game, and then of course, I mean, I can't imagine Ohio State would be the 4. Either they're going to get in and be the 2 or the 3, or they're not going to get in. I mean, them being the 4. So then they would have to play Georgia in the national championship game. I can't see a scenario where Ohio State and Georgia would play before that if Georgia wins. Now, the SEC championship game, if Georgia does not win the SEC championship game, you totally could see Ohio State and Georgia first round game. Georgia maybe as the 4 or both of them as a 2 or 3 combination. We would just have to see. But what I would be curious about with Georgia being considered somewhere around a 7-point favorite over Ohio State, maybe it might be more, okay, is would that number change if the game were not in Indianapolis? In other words, if the game were in Dallas or Miami, would that mean that Georgia would be slightly more favored because the game wouldn't be as regional? I mean, if Georgia were playing Ohio State in Charlotte, would Georgia be considered a bigger favorite? Obviously, in Atlanta, well, we think we know Georgia would earn a couple more points just by having the game close to home. But when you look at the two teams, Georgia's had a better season. They haven't lost. They've been more consistent throughout the year. Now, Ohio State has scored a fair amount, certainly lately. I mean, their last few games, they've scored over 50, 3 of their last 6 games. Well, 4 of their last 6 games. They've really turned it on scoring wise. But they're playing some teams in that time that weren't so hot. I mean, Purdue, I'm sorry, they're just not good. I don't care about who the upsets that they pull. Maryland, not good. Rutgers, not good. Akron with 59 points. They've shown that they can explode, but they've gotten better defensively. But we've seen with everybody that Georgia's played that just because you score 40, 50 points on somebody, that does not mean you're going to score 20 on Georgia. Take a look at everybody that the Dogs have played this season, and then compare that to their then compare that to their average. I mean, I'm going to try to go through it real quick here because I think it's actually important, and I don't know if I can quickly do it. But like for instance, Clemson, they scored 10 points against Georgia. That's not very good, needless to say. And right now, they're averaging 24. So Georgia held them 14 below. UAB, Georgia did not permit UAB to score. So that was kind of problematic for the Blazers. And then UAB scored their average. Now, you know what? I'm going to skip UAB because they don't really matter that much. South Carolina scoring 40 points against Georgia. Excuse me, scoring 13 against Georgia. The rest of the season, Carolina has done okay. 23, not great. So it can't be a surprise that they struggled against the Dogs. Vanderbilt didn't score. Arkansas didn't score. Okay. Vanderbilt, they're sitting at 15 points a game. No wonder they got shut out against Georgia. But Arkansas, Auburn, Kentucky, Florida, a combined total, those teams, and I'll just throw Missouri in there. Those four teams total scored scored 30 points against Georgia. 36 points. That's just nothing. And when you look at the success that those teams have had scoring, I don't think I need to explain how much Auburn, can score when they, get rolling. Missouri, not so different the same way. Tennessee, the same situation. Tennessee, this past weekend really struggled. I mean, Mizzou scored 31 points a game. They scored 6 against Georgia. The Gators, 33. They scored 7. I don't know. I don't know how they scored that 7, but they did. Scoring offense for the Cats, 29. They were the most effective team I thought that Georgia played. They scored 13 against Georgia. 31 for Auburn. They scored 10. Okay, and then this past weekend, well, let's just talk about Arkansas for a second. They're scoring 31 points a game. They didn't score. So that's kind of the thing. Tennessee, I'll run through the Tennessee thing as well. Tennessee scored 17 points against Georgia. They're averaging 36. So generally speaking, Georgia's holding people 20 points below their average. Ohio State, they're leading the country in scoring at 46 points a game. That's a lot. That would mean that they would score, in theory, 26 against Georgia. The problem for Ohio State, I think, in that game is that their defense has been exploded on a couple of times. They're allowing 20 points a game. That's not unbelievable. But I do think Ohio State's one of the teams that can beat the Dogs for sure. I just don't. I think the 7 points is about right. I think that if you're saying, hey, Ohio State, it would be better in Indianapolis. I wouldn't necessarily argue that. I mean, they've played there multiple times at Lucas Oil Field. They're used to it. Big Ten plays there all the time. But Ohio State has the players. They have the formula you need. They have the overall team. They have the speed, and they have the quarterback. But that they are a 7-point dog would give them not. I mean, it's not like you're going to lose for sure, but it doesn't give you a massive chance to win the game. About 60, 70, about 70% chance that you would win the game if you're somewhere around a touchdown dog, touchdown favorite. You should win the game. It's not a certainty. Thinking back, I mean, Georgia's not been a 7-point favorite. Oh man, it's been a while. Let me ask. That's actually a very interesting question. I'll be very curious to see what Georgia is going to be in terms of favorite in the future against Alabama. Now that number is not going to be hypothetical. That will be a real number. Let me go back here and check this. I do this on the fly. I apologize, but Georgia's been favored so often that it's kind of gotten old. They've been favored 7 or so. They were a 7-point favorite in 18 against the Gators, 7-point favorite against LSU and lost, 7-point in 16 and beat Missouri, 7-point in 16 and beat Penn State. That was the end of the 15 season. So they've not really lived around the 7-point margin very often, but they are 21-9 in games there in that ballpark. Let me go to 8 real quick just to see. Yeah, 22-8, not a lot of big difference. But generally speaking, when they're whether they're a touchdown favorite or more, or a touchdown favorite or fewer, they win. What do you think about Ohio State and Georgia? Do you think Georgia would certainly win that game? Do you think it's the Buckeyes to lose? You tell me below. We'll see you over on the website. Thanks for watching, dogpost.com.